Now, comedian, writer and director Stewart Lee was once described by Ricky Gervais as Britain's funniest man. His career in comedy has been prolific, but Stewart claims that he and many other British comedians owe their success to a man most of us have never even heard of. Stewart agreed to right that wrong for us tonight and answer the burning question: just who the heck is Ted Chippington?
I'm about to embark on a journey by train.
Walking down this road and this chap comes up to me and said, tell us how far it is to the railway station, mate.
But it's also a journey into my own past.
I said, 1 mile. He said, 1 mile. I said, 1 mile, roughly speaking.
I'm hoping to meet the man who inspired me to become a comedian. The man who is, I believe, the missing link of modern British stand-up, Ted Chippington.
I first saw Ted supporting The Fall in Birmingham in 1984. Alternative comedy was very much a London phenomenon. If you were going to see comics outside the capital, they were going to be opening for bands. Ted came out, stood absolutely motionless, and told the same joke, more or less, over and over and over again in a monotonous voice, provoking a hostile and tense reaction from the audience. It was, and remains to this day, the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I had my hair cut the other day, walked down the barber shop, said to the bloke, cut me hair around the back, mate. He said, well, what's wrong with this route? Anyway,
he just came too early. You know, he was so far behind the times, he was ahead of them.
There must be a side to all of this which goes, Ted Chippington, hardly anyone else will know who he is, and then I'll play it and people go, this sounds like rubbish, and you go, well, you don't understand, do you?
I was walking down this road and this long-haired chap comes up to me. He said, do you want some LSD, man? I said, don't be stupid, mate, we've gone decimal now, you know, pounds, shillings and pence, no good to me no more. 1967, a good year.
The delivery! Not even, none of that fake trying, none of that walking about, none of that kind of prowling the stage trying to assert yourself over the audience. I'm standing here,
well, there's not
saying
much,
these things.
You know, there's not much content and there isn't much form either.
Yeah.
And yet time is passing and it seems to work. Okay, this is the kind of official family tree of alternative stand-up comedy where you've got the 70s folk singers, Jasper Carrott, Billy Connolly, Max Boyce, going through to Ben Elton, the Lexi Sale comic strip in the 80s, down to Reeves and Mortimer, Newman and Baddiel in the 90s, and then today's lot, Ricky Gervais, Jimmy Carr, Mighty Boosh, whatever. But there's a real alternative, if you like, history of alternative comedy where you could start with John Dowie, Victoria Wood, John Cooper Clarke in the 70s, go via all the people we saw supporting bands, Ted Chippington, Frank Sidebottom in the 80s, through Simon Munnery and all the people I like who are my friends, and you end up in the same place, Ricky Gervais, Jimmy Carr, Mighty Boosh. So there is a place for Ted Chippington, and it's right in the middle of the family tree, but it's just a family tree that you don't know anything about.
Bloke comes up to me, so I've just got back from Nam. I said, what do you mean, mate, Vietnam? He said, no, Cheltenham.
They are.
So his importance to alternative comedy cannot be overstated. Oh, yes, it can. I did it just then.
If he'd been around 4 or 5 years later, he would have been still doing it, because you all, you know, your generation have careers out of it, don't you?
Yeah, well, there was no indication then that there was a career ladder.
Well, I think if there was a career ladder, Ted would have been carrying it rather than climbing it.
Yeah.
But that was Ted. Despite his devoted fan base, there's no commercially available video of his stand-up, no Channel 4 series, and precious little evidence that he ever existed, apart from one lo-fi live album and a novelty single. Ted went back to being a lorry driver in the early 90s, but now he's resurfaced and he's started gigging again.
It's strange going to meet someone that was such a big influence on you as a teenager, that changed your life. I mean, there's every possibility it will be a disappointment.
Ted's house, 23 years since I first saw him. I knew Ted had started out, like so many at the time, emceeing for bands, but I wanted to find out how he became a comedian.
Hi, Ted.
Sure.
Thanks for seeing us.
Come in.
Cheers. Up here.
Yeah, just right up. The reason I became called a comedian was I was doing a
few gigs around Cornwall with another group from Birmingham, and we got to this venue in Falmouth, I think it was, and on the thing outside it had, you know, tonight, blah blah, plus top comedian. So we all had a good old chuckle and thought, that's what I'll be then, a top comedian.
Well,
so,
what did you think you were before that then?
No, there wasn't. I don't know really.
I
was just someone doing something, you know, for no particular reason, I suppose.
It's really great.
Well, after being called a top comedian, I'd have thought, well, I need a couple of jokes. So,
yeah.
And I think I did have the 1 mile joke by that point.
I was walking down the road the other day, this bloke comes up to me, he said, tell us how far the railway station is away from here, mate. I said, 1 mile. He said, 1 mile? I said, 1 mile, roughly speaking. Couldn't be too sure, you know. You didn't find that funny then? Well, I do. Thank you.
It didn't bother me if I went down really badly. I wouldn't come off thinking, oh, what a disaster. You know, I'd more likely come off thinking, that was a great night, you know. It got boring, really. It was when it became sort of popular, you know.
When it became popular.
You know, and I couldn't, that's why I sort of more or less packed it in, I think, because it's just, I couldn't see the point anymore of just everyone thinking I was great, when the whole intention was for everyone to get annoyed, you know.
Right.
So.
I remember reading something where you said your ambition was always to appear on the West Midlands local television Pebble Mill at 1 lunchtime show.
I used to sit there and think, you know, that's only round the corner, you know. I'd love to go on that one.
Ted achieved his ambition, but somehow the BBC forgot to record the moment, so Ted's own VHS copy is all that we have.
I remember now, I'm looking out of the window of the street that goes outside,
Bristol
thinking,
Road, isn't it, round there, yeah.
God, I remember cycling past there, or I've walked past there looking in through the window, and there I was.
Your last chance now to join him. You know that can't be bad. Oh no. And again, chill up, you. And you know that can't really be bad. No.
You'll be pleased to know that you've scored the highest rating ever on the NAFometer. That was pretty appalling, if you don't mind me saying so.
Well, I find that quite shocking, actually, that you have to say that, you know.
What was the worst it was ever received? What was the most amount of people that were wound up?
Glastonbury, I would have thought. There was all sorts of bottles and cans flying, and then I'd make the most of any. If they were full ones, I'd collect them, take them home afterwards. Which always got me. I'd sort of think, well, what are you throwing full cans of beer for? You know, just to drink most of it and then lob them at me. You know.
It's an odd thing. I mean, I suppose there's a case to be made. This country's Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
There was a certain, why shouldn't I carry on with this and just do it?
And now Ted's back on the road once more.
So what's it been like doing it again then? After
really
15
good,
years?
Yeah. It's slightly nerve-wracking the first time, but there is probably more scope now to be accepted. But then again, I still would like to be a bit on the outside, just to make it more interesting, you know.
See, I saw you in '84, and that was the point I thought I really want to be a stand-up comedian. And I haven't enjoyed it at all. It's been hard life. And I blame you for that.
Oh, good. I do like comedy, but I just don't like hardly any of the comedians, you know, so...
Walking down the road the other day, this chap comes up to me.
He said, how far is it to the railway station?
I said, 1 mile. He said, 1 mile? I go, 1 mile.
Roughly speaking.
Just f***ing rubbish, isn't it?
It's difficult to say exactly who was the first alternative comedian, but Ted Chippington was definitely the first post-alternative comedian. For a whole bunch of us that started out as young comics in the 80s, Ted taught us that stand-up comedy could be anything we wanted it to be, and that just because an audience didn't like something didn't mean it wasn't any good. And you know, that can't really be bad.
Don't you think it's all over as soon as the historians move in? So don't you think what we're doing now is awful? To even talk about it.
Yeah, I regret ever having brought the subject up.